In today's biased news, Iran sits down with Syria, Serbia faces a tragic school shooting, and the turmoil in Sudan continues. Fighting has resumed and intensified in Sudan's capital Khartoum as the latest ceasefire expires. On Sunday, the Sudanese army announced it was attacking the city from all directions with airstrikes and heavy artillery to flush out combatants of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. For context, in April of 2019, both the Sudanese army and the RSF turned against former President al-Bashir following months of pro-democracy protests, and a transitional government dominated by civilians was created and subsequently overthrown by both groups in October of 2021. The current fighting was triggered by disagreement over how the RSF's integration into the army should take place, and under whose authority. The International Committee of the Red Cross says the first plane carrying aid landed at Port Sudan with 8 tons of relief supplies, including health kits for hospitals. Over 70% of health facilities in the capital have been forced to close as a result of the fighting that erupted on the 15th of April, and more than 500 people have been reported killed, with the actual number of dead and injured expected to be much higher. Meanwhile, foreign embassies have been evacuating their nationals amid the fighting, as Port Sudan overflows with people boarding ships bound for Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Over the weekend, heavy fighting resumed in Khartoum with army operations against RSF troops north of the city center, including strikes near a major oil refinery. On Saturday, former Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok warned that the conflict could become worse than those in Syria and Libya, which greatly increased instability in the region and resulted in a significant number of deaths. Speaking from Nairobi, he said, "This is a huge country, very diverse. I think this will be a nightmare for the world. This is not a war between an army and a small rebellion. It's almost like 2 armies, well-trained and well-armed." Both sides have agreed to a new 7-day ceasefire, according to a statement on Tuesday by the Foreign Ministry of South Sudan. It remains unclear if this ceasefire will last any longer than the previous. In Ukraine conflict news, today, President Zelensky will discuss aid for Kyiv with the leaders of Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. Meanwhile, Russian authorities have called to double missile production. On Tuesday, Pentagon officials ordered $300 million in fresh military aid to Ukraine, including unguided rockets, artillery rounds, howitzers, and ammunition ahead of an anticipated spring counteroffensive. In corporate news, former Audi boss Rupert Stadler will offer a confession in the trial over falsified emissions details in the company's diesel cars. Stadler is admitting to his part in what is commonly referred to as the Dieselgate scandal, where some of the world's largest car manufacturers participated in a historically large plot to hide the true emission rates of their cars in order to achieve greater profitability. This comes at a time of increased concern over the direct incompatibility of a sustainable future and the profit-driven market which governs us, a contradiction which inevitably leads to scandals such as this one. Mafia Crackdown in Europe. Over 100 people were arrested during early morning raids on Wednesday in several European countries as part of a crackdown on the Italian 'Ndrangheta mob. The arrests were part of a coordinated probe by investigators in Germany, Belgium, France, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. The integration of different European security forces as part of the same union has allowed for these larger-scale international actions. In China, another anti-corruption case is nearing its end. A former party chief of Hangzhou is accused of taking advantage of his position to receive bribes, directly or through his relatives, totaling more than $28 million. The CCDI said the former official ignored the spirit of the central government, colluding with and supporting the disorderly expansion of capital. He also violated party rules by interfering in the market economy and engaging in corrupt activities with his family members. It's not uncommon to see cases like this lead to severe punishment in China, up to and including the death penalty. A rare non-American school shooting. According to confirmed but unofficial information, 8 children and a security guard have been shot dead by one of their classmates in the Serbian capital of Belgrade. The unidentified shooter, a 14-year-old local, opened fire on his teachers and fellow students with his father's handgun in the early morning hours of the day. As these sorts of events are extremely uncommon in Serbia and the region, the authorities are currently trying to find the motive behind this tragedy. And in positive news of the day, the Iranian president has arrived in Syria and is expected to meet with President Bashar al-Assad in what Tehran has described as a sign of its, quote, strategic victory in regional affairs. Raisi landed in Damascus on Wednesday for a 2-day trip and received an official welcome to kick off the first state visit to Syria by an Iranian president in 13 years. This comes as yet another wave of positive news from the region, after Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Yemen had previously begun peace negotiations. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you missed them, be sure to check out our previous episodes by following the links on your screen. As always, you can support the show and get the news in text form a few hours early by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought.